Hello and welcome back to the NBA DFS Slate Breakdown for Wednesday, March 20th. We are here. We're breaking it down. We got 8 games to go over tonight. We had 5 games yesterday. Yesterday's slate went pretty well. If you are not aware, I had a nice little takedown last night and won $40,000 to first. I also had a lineup in ninth, and I think it was 4 total in like the top 40. So I did pretty well with my 75 entries, and hopefully we can do it again today. One of the things I will say in that show that I did end up doing was for the Houston versus Washington game. Washington only had like 9 guys, and we had seen 2 days prior, or the 2 games prior, where they got blown out. Jordan Poole only played 23 games in the blowout, or 23 minutes in the blowout. And once I saw that kind of a little bit later in the day, I realized how important it could be to get the bench guys on Washington, and I ended up pushing them really hard. I did mention it on the show yesterday too, that, you know, it's something that I was considering, but later in the day, I really nailed it down and went pretty hard in that. I had a ton of the bench guys, and I really didn't have many of the starters outside of Baldwin, who Baldwin was a, you know, stone minimum play, but was starting, and I expected him to play regardless, even if it's a blowout or not. Some of the starters still had to play because they just didn't have enough guys totally, and I expected him to be one. So played with him and the guys off the bench, and it came through for me. Was able to get first with a nice correlated lineup there, and we're going to jump into today's slate. So 8-gamer, once again, like yesterday, pretty much all blowout, you know, scenarios outside of Cleveland and Miami. Now, one of the things I will say is that if any of these blowouts stay close, you're going to likely need players on both sides of that game to win tonight. That's pretty much what happened last night. Dallas versus Spurs stayed a little close. Denver and Minnesota stayed close, and you needed those games with that big game total, or, you know, all the value in Washington, Houston. So pretty similar slate tonight as last night, just a couple more games, so more chance of, you know, some good spots. Ownership's a little more spread out, a little easier to get different on these big slates. So let's start it out. Starting at point guard, highest owned, we got SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Guy's just been unreal, and he's going to continue being unreal. He's in a very good spot versus the Jazz. Absolutely do not mind going here. The one worry here is that, you know, they win in blowout fashion. They are home, so that doesn't help the fact, you know, the Jazz aren't that good, and the Jazz don't have Clarkson or Markkanen. So there's an absolute chance that this game is a blowout, and he just doesn't get, you know, the last 5 minutes or so in a close game, which all of those points, or a majority of those points, usually go to the stud in that situation. So he might miss, you know, that upside. I don't mind going to him, going to definitely be getting to him, but I do worry about that aspect a little bit. Next, we got Tyrese Halliburton, who, you know, still hasn't been that great, but at 9.1K, he can still get you there. He can absolutely get you the mid-50s. He's been living in the mid-40s, and we know he has that ceiling of, you know, 60, 70. So I don't mind going to Halliburton tonight. I'm definitely going to have some, without a doubt. And then De'Aaron Fox is high owned as well. This is one of those games. This is a very similar situation as that Washington Houston game yesterday. Sacramento in a very good spot to score fantasy points, but there's a very large chance this game is a blowout. Now, I do think there's more likelihood this game stays close than I did yesterday for the Washington game. Washington is terrible to begin with. Not that Toronto's any good, but they're at least better than Washington. And I think they have better, scrubs that are still available than Washington had yesterday. So I do think there's a higher likelihood this game stays close, but it does look like there's a chance that Toronto only has like 9 guys. And if they only have 9 guys, we're in a very similar spot as to yesterday, where if it's a blowout, it's going to be those bench guys or the younger guys that get the extra minutes, not the guys we know of and we know can start. So it's an interesting game, but if this game stays close, De'Aaron Fox, Sabonis, all of these guys just have a giant ceiling tonight. So definitely a little interested on him. Pivot-wise, Tyrese Maxey, point guards versus Phoenix, been a theme for a while. This guy can easily get into the 50s, has a 60s point ceiling, 9.2K. Not many people are going there. I am absolutely willing to get there and to get to some Tyrese. Next, Scoot Henderson. He's back to starting. Played 30 minutes the other night. Did get into a little foul trouble, so maybe that hurt his minutes a little bit, but I do expect him in that 30-32 range. And he's like a fantasy per minute player, so I don't mind getting there in this spot. If he plays well, gets a couple extra minutes, gets to 34 minutes, he can absolutely get there. I do worry a little bit about his ceiling, as, we've seen very few games into the 40s, but we have seen a couple. He just needs to get those extra minutes to really have that ability to get there. And on to DraftKings point guards, high-owned, SGA, Bruce Brown, and Tyrese Halliburton. Bruce Brown is probably going to start at point guard tonight. When he started last time at point guard, he played a lot of minutes, got into, mid-30s. Don't mind going back there in this spot. I think he does have, a ceiling as well. So I don't mind going there. And into the matchup tool, we got Tyrese, SGA, Halliburton, and Drew Holiday. All look pretty interesting. I do want to bring up the Boston situation. Drew and Jaylen Brown are both questionable. If one can't go, or both can't go, it's going to make all the Boston guys look much more interesting. On to shooting guard, FanDuel. We got Grady Dick, Stanley Amude, and Chris Dunn. So Grady Dick thrust back into the starting lineup, but thrust back in, probably playing meaningful, solid minutes tonight because of all their injuries. I would not be surprised if he's 34 plus minutes, and at that point he's going to look interesting again. Stanley likely starts again, played 34 minutes last game. He could very easily get that again. It's really just going to come down to his shot is falling or not. If his shot falls, then he could get there. If his shot doesn't fall, he ain't getting there. Chris Dunn, solid performance from a fantasy per minute guy, but his minutes are always the worry here. 27 last game, 24 the game before that. Jordan Clarkson is out, so he will have a little bit of a floor for his minutes, but I just don't expect a 30-plus minute game, so I can't, expect a 30-plus point performance. Now, he can get 30 points, but it's just few and far between on the minutes that he's playing. I don't mind going there. I'll have a little bit, but I do think he's going a little over-owned. Pivot-wise, Gary Trent. Look, Gary Trent is expensive now. I do think he's kind of too expensive because so much of his scoring relies on actual putting the basket or the ball into the basket. He is so heavy reliant on that it's hard for him to get that 6-7x. Now, a couple turnovers can go his way and he can get there. That's what happened versus Orlando and kept him afloat, but I don't think you can count on that game in and game out. I do like him, but there's a little bit of worry there for me If he was high owned, I would probably be kind of jumping off. The fact that he's a lower owned, I'm still willing to take some. Ochai played 31, 34 minutes. He just hasn't been able to get really anything going outside of his first game starting with Toronto on the 3rd. But he's kind of in the situation where if his shot falls, he'll score, and it's really just based on that. Next, Desmond Bane. It's back to the Desmond Bane show. I think 8K is too cheap for him. Played 32 minutes, 37 minutes. So I do think his minutes are back. I think he's going to be at 36-ish. And without all their studs, he's an extremely good fantasy producer, has a ceiling, into the 70s, and can definitely get to the 50s, as we saw him have a run of good games here before he got hurt. So I definitely like Desmond Bane, definitely getting to a decent amount of him. And on to DraftKings shooting guard. We got Malik Monk, Stanley Umude, and Aaron Naismith. I do expect Malik Monk to play a couple extra minutes. We got Kevin Huerter out. I think that there's a very good chance he plays 30 minutes. He is a very good fantasy producer per minute, and it's a good matchup. So we can absolutely get there. The one thing I do have to say, he is a player that his minutes will probably get pinched a little bit more because he comes off the bench than a starter for how many minutes he plays in a blowout. So that is my worry. I think his floor is pretty low, but his ceiling is pretty high. So you can absolutely take some chances. I don't love that he's high owned, but don't mind having a little bit. And Naismith is a little interesting. Good matchup. He gets extra minutes generally without Mathurin, so I don't mind going there a little bit. Matchup tool-wise, Josh Giddey, Andrew Nembhard, Gary Trent, and Derek White are all coming in. And let's get back over to FanDuel. Bruce Brown, Grady Dick, Jordan Nwora, Aaron Naismith, Jake LaRivia. Jake is actually going lower owned. He's 12% owned. I don't mind getting there. Ben's getting solid minutes. They got a lot of guys hurt again. So I do expect him to get minutes. We got him at 32.5. If he's in the 30s, he has a 40-point ceiling. Can absolutely give you 30 plus. So I don't mind going there whatsoever in this matchup. Nora, look, he's been playing very well, producing at a solid rate, 1.04 fantasy per minute over the last 20 coming off the bench. But minutes are an issue. 17, 21, 16, 25. So, I mean, his ceiling is 25, 28 minutes or so. He's got to do a lot with a little bit to get there. Can he do it? Absolutely. He looks like he did get extra run last game in a blowout. So maybe he does get extra run in a blowout, but that's really the situation of you playing him. Something like that where it is a blowout. We covered Brown, covered Dick, and moving it over to small forward. Gosh. Malik Monk, Bruce Brown, Stanley Mead, and Aaron Naismith coming in. Really covered them all. Don't mind any of them. And matchup tool-wise, Harrison Brown, Stanley, Grayson Allen, and Gregory Jackson. I do think Grayson Allen's fairly interesting on this slate. I just think his price is a little high. If something were to happen where Booker, Beal, or Durant were not in, I would probably be playing a lot of Allen. But in this situation, maybe a little bit. Don't mind him as a flyer, but not getting to a ton of him. Gregory Jackson, he's been playing big minutes, and I would expect him to continue to do that. He has major upside. Don't mind going there at all. Power forward on FanDuel, we got Domantas Sabonis, Aaron Naismith, Kelly Olynyk. Sabonis is someone I do really like in this game. Again, this is one where you're going to want Toronto Raptors in your lineup, preferably more of the starters, because those are the guys likely to get the big minutes if this game stays close. So I am interested in Sabonis, but I'm probably only playing him if I have some Toronto guys. Aaron Naismith went over him. Don't mind him. Kelly Olynyk, he could definitely get there. I do worry that in a blowout, he just doesn't play as many minutes. But as it is, he's really only playing 28 minutes a night. And I don't think he has that big of a ceiling. So I do worry about getting to him too much. Pivot-wise, Jake, KD. I think KD is in an interesting spot. His prices came down a little bit, and he can absolutely torch this 76ers team that is just awful without Embiid. And it is one of the closer games of the night, which is at least interesting outside of that Miami-Cleveland game. Last pivot, Simona Fantasio. I gotta shout him out. Look, he was out last game. He has a toe injury. We're not sure if he's going to play, but I do really like him if he plays. He's been producing very, very well as a starter for the Pistons, and with everybody out, he's going to get good run, good usage, and I don't mind going back there. I mean, he absolutely can score 20 points, have, 5, 6, 7 rebounds, and get it done in a couple different ways. So at 6,100, the usage he's going to get in a pace-up spot makes it pretty interesting to me, and I don't mind going there whatsoever. We have him at 34.5. I wouldn't be that surprised if he's, 35, 37, 38 if he plays, because Thompson, Quentin Grimes is out, and Isaiah Stewart. So, their small forward, power forward position is kind of beat up today. On to power forward on DK. We got Jordan Nwora, super cheap on DK. So I'm much more inclined to play him there than on FanDuel. On both sides, you can absolutely play him, but he is much cheaper on DK. Jalen Williams is in a fine spot. His price is low enough with a giant ceiling that I would absolutely get there. The big worry here, blowout. So if you're playing, SGA or Jalen Williams, might not be a bad idea to grab a Utah player in that lineup as well. Greg Jackson we went over, and Jay Crowder at 3,300. He played 32 minutes last game. He can absolutely get back up to that. There is no Giannis, so 3,300, super cheap for a guy that's likely to get minutes. If he hits a couple shots, maybe gets a couple extra minutes. So definitely a little intrigued by that. On the matchup tool, Keegan Murray tops the matchup tool. Santi Aldama, Jalen Williams, Kevin Durant. I do think Keegan Murray's a bit interesting. I have to bring up the fact that this game could be a blowout, but he has a giant ceiling if that ball is falling. He can shoot a ton of threes and can make a lot when he's feeling it. He had 5 the other night, put up 44. That's just what's going to happen for him to get that ceiling. That 3 ball needs to be falling. And onto the center spot, Jonte Porter, Domantas Sabonis, Kelly Olynyk, 3 is highs. Jonte Porter, absolutely interesting. He scores very, very well fantasy per minute wise. So the big thing is here, does he get extra minutes? 22, 27, 21, and 22 were the last 4 games. I think you can do 22, 24-ish, fairly confidently. I just don't know if he's going to get any additional on top of that. Now, I do think they need to see what the guy really has, and they know what Olynyk has. So they might as well give him more run in a blowout, but we'll see, what really happens there as the game comes through. But I definitely am willing to take some. Domantas, talked about him. I love the spot for Chet Holmgren. 8K is just too cheap for this guy's ceiling. And Jazz aren't great for center. 28th overall. They can definitely give it up to center. So I'm very interested with Holmgren. Same thing, though. Could be a blowout. Paying up for those guys in a blowout is a little sketchy. It's minus 15.5. So that game has the biggest chance of blowout. But there's some Jazz guys that are interesting. You can definitely fit them in with a Chet. So fairly interested there. And moving on to DK, Jonte Porter, Domantas Sabonis, Chet Holmgren are the 3 high owned. And matchup tool wise, Sabonis, Jaren Jackson, Chet, and John Collins. John Collins is questionable. If he's out, Walker Kessler becomes very interesting. Thunder 30th versus center. We know Walker Kessler can really score from the center position when he gets his chance. So I'm extremely interested with Kessler if Collins is out. And that'll do it for us today, guys. Good luck. Let's hope for some more takedowns today, and I will be back tomorrow. Adios, guys. Bye.